on today. I hope I will see you at Second Sunday Lunch, which will be right in this space. At least it's not raining anymore, but we had every expectation it would. So we have outdoor seating available for those who prefer it, indoor for those who prefer it, and that means if you can please move on out fairly quickly after the end of the service, and any strong people who want to help Jeff set up will be able to turn over this room before people come back with their food. We serve the lunch around the back of this building by the kitchen door. There's also the Holiday Bazaar, which is also where you pick up your coffee. So coffee, treats, Christmas ornaments, all in the fireside room right here, the building with the blue doors. And that's also the location of this evening's Peaceful Presence service, which features another cellist, Charlotte Midwinter, of our own congregation, will be playing cello. Sean Hansen will be playing piano, and we will have a lovely half-hour or so meditation of peace traditions from the various congregations in our area as we host the monthly Multi-Faith Voices for Peace and Justice service. And there is so much coming up, so please do take the order of service home, peruse, follow the links, and also make sure you have that listing of holiday events, which of course is also online, so you don't miss the good stuff coming up. I am pleased to welcome Crystal Hernandez to tell us about our Justice Partner.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today and supporting Octera's efforts for a healthy planet. My name is Crystal Hernandez. I'm a program manager for Octera's ASAP program. ASAP stands for Octera Student Ambassador Program, and it caters to high school and college age students who want to make a difference in their communities. Octera relies on community donors like you to continue working on local pressing environmental efforts. To paint you a picture of some of the work we do, recently, as part of our ongoing lecture series, we were able to get together a panel of students from Cupertino's Youth Climate Action Team and senior residents of the Forum at Rancho San Antonio for a panel discussion on climate solutions. The students shared their work and answered questions from the attendees at the forum, but the highlight of this event was the intergenerational collaboration that took place within breakout sessions between the two groups. We're now currently building upon how we can further take action on these ideas and streamline our efforts together with Cupertino Youth Climate Action and the Forum. These are some of the things we're able to accomplish with the help of our sponsors and partners. Your donation today will help support ASAP's program to build out our monthly public comment workshop series to inform students and the public about how to effectively speak at their local town hall city council meetings in support of climate initiatives. Currently, we're pushing for REACH codes to solidify and reach above the California Green Building Standards update coming January 2023 within the SF Bay Area. Actions like these will be crucial for us to achieve our Climate 2030 goals. UUCPA have been longtime supporters, champions, and encouragers of Octera and our evolution throughout the years. We would not be here without the support of your organization and the individuals that make up the congregation. We want to welcome you to join our monthly public comment trainings, lecture series, and webinars and events. These opportunities are available through our website at octera.org or via our social media platforms. We are on Instagram as Planet Octera and ASAP links for our Student ASAP program. We would love to have your involvement and for you to check out our table that we have at the entrance. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. That's really exciting, hopeful work that you're doing, and it's good to be a part of it. And now, let us begin our service. If you have a chalice there at home, please light it along with this one as we hear the words of Deborah Burrell. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. With our centering words each week, we draw on one of the sources of our living tradition. Today's words have been attributed to the 20th century U.S.-American writer John Updike. Memory has a spottiness, as if the film was sprinkled with developer instead of immersed in it. As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us allow ourselves to arrive here fully in this sacred hour in our special place. Let's join in singing. Here we have gathered. It's number 360 in the gray hymnal. If you're online, the words are in your online order of service. We have a revision of a line in verse 2. The line is going to be, "We of all ages living out our span, infants and sages sharing what we can." Please rise in body or spirit.
Gathered side by side, so Our story today comes from Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Pa is telling Laura the story of Grandpa's sled and the pig. Pa said, "When your grandpa was a boy, Laura, Sunday did not begin on Sunday morning as it does now. It began at sundown on Saturday night. Then everyone stopped every kind of work or play. Supper was solemn. After supper, Grandpa's father read aloud a chapter of the Bible, while everyone sat straight and still in his chair. Then they all knelt down, and their father said a long prayer. When he said Amen, they got up from their knees, and each took a candle and went to bed. They must go straight to bed with no playing, laughing, or even talking. Sunday morning, they ate a cold breakfast because nothing could be cooked on Sunday. Then they all dressed in their best clothes and walked to church. They walked because hitching up the horses was work, and no work could be done on Sunday. In church, Grandpa and his brothers must sit perfectly still for 2 long hours and listen to the sermon. They dared not fidget on the hard bench. They dared not swing their feet. They must sit perfectly motionless and never for one instant take their eyes from the preacher. When church was over, they walked slowly home. Then all the long afternoon they must sit in a row on a bench and study their catechism until at last the sun went down and Sunday was over. Now, Grandpa's home was about halfway down the side of a steep hill. In winter, it was the best place for sliding downhill that you can possibly imagine. One week, Grandpa and his 2 brothers, James and George, were making a new sled. They worked at it every minute of their playtime. It was the best sled they had ever made, and it was so long that all 3 of them could sit on it, one behind the other. They planned to finish it in time to slide downhill Saturday afternoon. But that week, their father was cutting down trees in the big wood. He was working hard, and he kept the boys working with him. They worked till dark, and then there were chores to do, and after supper, they had to go to bed so they could get up early in the morning. They had no time to work on the sled until Saturday afternoon. Then they worked at it just as fast as they could. But they didn't get it finished until the sun went down Saturday night. After the sun went down, they could not slide downhill, not even once. That would be breaking the Sabbath. So they put the sled in the shed behind the house to wait until Sunday was over. All the 2 long hours in church next day, while they kept their feet still and their eyes on the preacher, they were thinking about the sled. At home, while they ate dinner, they couldn't think of anything else. After dinner, their father sat down to read the Bible, and Grandpa and James and George sat as still as mice on their bench with their catechism. But they were thinking about the sled. The sun shone brightly, and the snow was smooth and glittering. They could see it through the window. It was a perfect day for sliding downhill. They looked at their catechism, and they thought about the new sled, and it seemed that Sunday would never end. After a long time, they heard a snore. Then James looked at George and tiptoed out of the room. And George looked at Grandpa and tiptoed after James. And Grandpa looked fearfully at their father, but on tiptoe he followed George and left their father snoring. They took their new sled and went quietly up to the top of the hill. They meant to slide down just once. Then they would put the sled away and slip back to their bench in the catechism before their father woke up. The sled started at first slowly, then faster and faster. It was running, flying down the long, steep hill, but the boys dared not shout. They must slide silently past the house without waking their father. There was no sound except the little whir of the runners on the snow and the wind rushing past. Then, just as the sled was swooping toward the house, a big black pig stepped out of the woods. He walked into the middle of the road and stood there. The sled was going so fast it couldn't be stopped. There wasn't time to turn it. The sled went right under the hog and picked him up. With a squeal, he sat down on James. And he kept on squealing, loud and shrill. They flashed by the house, the pig sitting in front, then James, then George, then Grandpa, and they saw their father standing in the doorway, looking at them. They couldn't stop. They couldn't hide. There was no time to say anything. Down the hill they went, the hog sitting on James and squealing all the way. At the bottom of the hill they stopped. The hog jumped off James and ran away into the woods, still squealing. The boys walked slowly and solemnly up the hill. They put the sled away. They sneaked into the house and slipped quietly to their places on the bench. Their father was reading his Bible. He looked up at them without saying a word. Then he went on reading, and they studied their catechism. But when the sun went down and the Sabbath day was over, their father took them out to the woodshed and tanned their jackets. First James, then George, then Grandpa.
Thank you, Paul. Service when we share our joys and sorrows, anything important weighing on our hearts or lightening them that we wish this community to share with us. You can always fill out a card right here before the service. If you're on Zoom, please do put it in the Zoom chat and I will share. And people also send me joys and sorrows all through the week. And I'm glad to share some from the email address joyconcern@uucpa.org. Look at this. I seem to have gotten one just as the service. Blessed be. Now let us sing together. Open My Heart is number 1013 in the Teal hymnal if you're using the book. Again, the words are in your order of service. Folks online, we're going to sing it several times. It's a chant, and we'll rise as we sing. Open my heart to all that I seek, let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to all that I seek, let me be part of the love you give. Open my heart to Our reading today comes from the book Centuries of Childhood by Philippe Audiez, a French social historian. In the Middle Ages, at the beginning of modern times, and for a long time after that, in the lower classes, children were mixed with adults as soon as they were considered capable of doing without their mothers or nannies. Not long after a tardy weaning, in other words, at about the age of 7. They immediately went straight into the great community of adults, sharing in the work and play of their companions, old and young alike. Medieval civilization had no idea of education. Nowadays, our society depends, and knows that it depends, on the success of the educational system. It has a system of education, a concept of education, an awareness of its importance. New sciences such as psychoanalysis, pediatrics, and psychology devote themselves to the problems of childhood, and their findings are transmitted to parents by way of a mass of popular literature. The age groups of Neolithic times, the Hellenistic paideia, the rearing and education of an ideal citizen, presupposed a difference and a transition between the world of children and that of adults. A transition made by means of an initiation or an education. Medieval civilization failed to perceive this difference and therefore lacked this concept of transition. At the time that Philippe Ariès published that book in 1963, Centuries of Childhood, it was controversial in the academic world and has been controversial ever since. Did he properly consider enough of the world? Probably not. He was mostly looking at Western Europe. Did he consider different social classes and situations, different genders? Almost certainly not. He was mostly drawing on people's own written materials, school records, and diaries, so there's the literate class, and so on. Various criticisms about his method and his conclusions. But something that is now taken completely for granted is that children are, in fact, quite different from adults, have different developmental needs in getting from infancy to adulthood. And that ideas about that have changed over history. Some of the things that have changed are now things we now take, again, as just givens in our time. The discovery that children do have a capacity for reason. And that was followed in some places by an educational philosophy of developing the reason above all else. That wasn't always in every place and time considered even worthwhile while children were still pre-adult. The idea of childhood as a time of innocence has not always been in place, but when it came along, and how it stayed in our bones as our understanding of what we're like throughout our lifetimes, well, it's led to different conclusions. Some people conclude that adults should protect and preserve that innocence. Others conclude that children are incapable of moral reasoning. But in any case, most of us think of childhood, again, as a time before a certain kind of discovery of the ways of the world and ability to know right from wrong and so on. I think we take for granted now, although we might not have worded it quite the way Ariès did, the idea that children are, here are his words, a source of amusement and relaxation for the adults. I mean the way that we'll post funny stories of something a child said to our friends on social media. Or even the fact that we just share photos around and say, you know, look what he's doing right now. So Ariès pulls out an example of what he shows as what he believes was a change in the culture, showing that underway, in which a grandmother writes to her grown child, "I have been playing with your daughter for an hour now. She is delightful." Right? Nothing different than a grandmother might now write to her grandchild's parents. "Love your kid. This is great." And some reacted harshly to this change. None other than Michel de Montaigne said, "I cannot abide that passion for caressing newborn children, which have neither mental activities nor recognizable bodily shape by which to make themselves lovable. And I have never willingly suffered them to be fed in my presence." I know, I usually like Montaigne. What a grump. He sees nothing delightful in children's, as he says, frolicking games and infantile nonsense. And so for him, seeing his peers playing with infants and toddlers, he saw it as something adults did for our amusement, like monkeys. You couldn't absolutely just have an enjoyment of an actual relationship with somebody so far from adulthood. I think something else we take for granted nowadays, although we certainly debate about how children's education is to be carried out, we don't debate the fact that it is there for their development not only in mind, in reason, but also for other capacities that we value as adults. And Ariès traces how, as schools modeled themselves on the training of monastics, the discipline in school shifted from something like just a kind of military school harshness to, quote, an instrument of moral and spiritual improvement, adopted not only for its efficiency, but also because of its intrinsic moral and ascetic value. I don't think schools are such a place of asceticism nowadays, But we definitely have a sense that we're teaching children as we raise them in schools, in churches, in families, in neighborhoods. We're teaching them how to be moral citizens, people who will take on moral decisions and be important members of our society, as we all consider ourselves to be. And there's lots to say about what led to these changes. Arias has a lot of theories and a lot of details, but I'll just say one of the obvious ones is a drop in infant mortality. It's not that people in earlier times when infants died at a very high rate didn't love their infants or their very young children. Of course they did. Of course they were grieved when they died. But we can also understand that their attachment to them might have been quite different from our own. Just as our attachment to children is usually different than our attachment to a pet who we know is going to predecease us. And we're likely to feel differently toward a cat or a dog than we do toward a hamster or a guinea pig. Just knowing what kind of history we can hope for and expect together. Now, the ups and downs and the dates and the changes, well, they're obviously very reliant on where you are in the world, what's going on in that society at any particular time, what social class we're talking about, and the religious background. Because we can hear that in Laura Ingalls Wilder's Pause time, which must have been 1830s, 40s, 50s in there, not very long ago, they had a very different idea of how you get children to learn adult behavior. Their idea was pretty much, they just do it, you know? And if any of us doubt that a kid can sit still for 2 hours, well, they prove that they can. You might have to threaten them with beating. You might have to give them no choice of anything else enjoyable to do. But they're capable, if that's what you want. That story came to my mind immediately when I was thinking about how our church is going to be changing. Now, our church is a multi-generational place, and we have not, up until this point, expected anybody of any age to sit still, no fidgeting, no whispering, eyes on the preacher for 2 hours. That's about to change. No. Any of you want to volunteer for that, you go for it. We'll just move the chairs around you after the service and you can sit for another hour. But this congregation is multi-generational, obviously. It's also really worth saying that religious communities are one of the few places, certainly in the demographic that's typical of this congregation, where in our contemporary society, generations of people who are not related to each other, or even people who are related to each other, mix a whole lot. I mean, the way kids spend their days, if they go to school, and the vast majority do, is with other people their age, no more than a year older or younger than them. It's considered really out there to be in class with somebody who's maybe 3 years older or younger. Like, that just doesn't happen. And then, our families, again, this particular demographic, our families tend to be small. I grew up hearing about that as the nuclear family as opposed to the extended family. People whose cultures run to lots of brothers and sisters and lots of cousins and peoples of different generations living together. They would probably more call it a shrunk family. Their family is normal and the nuclear family is oddly small. But, that's what many of us are used to. At most, 3, 4, 5 people of at most 2 generations in one house. And here we come, and we are with people of different generations, and it's a real gift, If you're a grandparent, but your grandchildren live far away, You get some time to just see little ones and the way they are. And for the younger kids of all ages, it's really a boon, not only because maybe the elder members of their family and all of their beloved cousins and aunts and uncles live far away and they hardly see them, but also because they have these models of adulthood beyond their own family. Lots of different ways to grow up and be an adult as models around them that otherwise they would only see from their parents and their teacher. This is a real gift, and it's a rarity. It's also a little complicated. So I say things are changing because our two services are going to become one. That begins on December 25th. We're expecting quite a small service then, so actually we'll be in the fireside room, one service at 10:15, and that will continue thereafter year-round. Now, we've never had a service that was adults only. Even the 11 o'clock service that most people don't come to with kids because the kids' program is at 9:30, kids are always welcome here, especially newcomers. They might come to this one not realizing that there's a program especially for their kids at 9:30. And, people just come to different services. But, so we've always had to be, the adults have always had to know how to be welcoming to kids. But that is going to be stepped up quite a bit when we're all in one service together. And one of the changes that we're bringing that is coincidental, it's more about the end of COVID, end of COVID, than the single service. But we are going to resume what we haven't done since before COVID, which is having the kids in the first 15 minutes of most services. And that means a story for everybody every time. Yeah. And as we can see, we don't just have Reverend Kat as a great storyteller. We have Jane and many other people who are going to tell stories, which, most of us like, no matter what age we are. There's also going to be, there are going to be a couple other changes in our service. Back to having a short list of hymns for the opening hymn, so that the kids can get to know those 10 or so hymns over the course of the year. Then we'll change it up each year. Even though I spoke just a couple months ago about why we have the announcements at the very beginning, I think I'm going to move them to being after the kids leave for their Sunday school program. Because when you're only 15 minutes in the service, having 5 of them be announcements is, really. So that will be a little bit different. And we're giving a lot, and we're probably going to have what Reverend Kat keeps calling a playground, but I tell her she cannot utter those words without my giggling. But basically, a space on the floor, this side or that, for kids to go play quietly. If they do better with that, with something quiet to play with or read, than them sitting in the space with their parents until they go. It also means things are going to be a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more noisy. Because I got to tell you, we don't believe anymore that kids should be seen and not heard. We don't believe, we have not found through our own experience, that the best way to raise children into the kind of adults we hope them to be, hope they will become, is for them to act just like adults from a very early age. They have different developmental needs. And we want them to learn about adult worship. We want them to learn something about what it's like to be in this community full of adults, as well as in intergenerational services specifically built to be, interesting to people of all ages, and in addition to something they'll have once a month in lieu of being in this service, which is Children's Chapel, especially made for kids. We want them to learn to grow up into the kinds of adults we're all trying to be. And that's not a simple matter. It's not just for parents. It's not just for Sunday school teachers or our religious educators. It's something that we all do. As the expression goes, it takes a village to raise a child. That's not because everybody teaches RE, religious education. It's because children are watching us. And children learn from the expectations that we hold of them. Do you have to sit still and just read your catechism all day long? Or do you go out and play? And they learn from the way that the adults treat one another and treat them. What is expected of them as they grow up? We've also been talking about some very concrete ways that we can scaffold their growing up into being adults in this community and the wider community. That's one of my favorite metaphors from today's understanding of how children learn. Today's understanding of the fact that childhood is different, and kids need to learn how to be grown-ups, just like people have always known children need to learn a trade. And that it's similar. If it needs explaining, you explain something to a child. You tell them some of the ways that we do things, which might be, it's fourth Sunday brunch, kids. When you take a waffle, take one. Come back for more if you're still hungry. That way we make sure everybody has one, right? That's something that we want adults to do. It's something we want kids to learn to do. And then, of course, there's lots of things, actual skills that kids need to learn. And we scaffold them by saying, you know, if you get stuck, after I've explained to you how to make a sled, something kids apparently knew how to do quite easily, young children in the 1840s or 50s. We show you how, and then we say, I'm here. If you get stuck, you're not sure what to do next. That's the scaffold. And once they show, you know what, they're doing it without consulting us a lot, you can take down the scaffold. They've got it. We're going to have a lot more opportunities to do that in our services, so that a very young child, you know, in parents' arms, can hold on to the handle here as their parent lights the chalice and just feel a part of things. And when they're a little older and they have learned how to handle fire, they could actually light it. They could ring the bell. They could get to the age and ability where they could do a reading in the service or play an instrument, until finally they have the confidence and the ability to share something that they've written in the service and be a worship associate, as our teenagers often are, or help lead the service as one of the members of the coming of age group or the senior high youth group. And one of the things that we adults do is we tolerate a little less expertise. They're not quite ready to have the scaffold down. They're just learning, because we see that this is how they grow into being full members of an adult community right here. And not only that, they learn to be members of the wider community, like that Actera program. Kids are so passionate about the environment, about climate change. They're looking at us and saying, what are you leaving us? We need a better world. What better ambassadors to the adult world than teenagers? And they just need some training. How do I speak at a public meeting? How do I speak to adults in a way that they will listen and have to act on what I have to say? What a fabulous kind of training to create the next generation of adults, because that's what we're doing here. Here at church, those little ones, oh, they make noise in the service. They ask questions at the top of their lungs, and we'll teach them. Ask me quietly, you say to your kids. Speak to me quietly. And we help the adults who start to have hearing problems, who can't handle a little bit of talk around them. I get it. We do something about that by improving our assistive listening devices and making sure everybody knows that they're here and can be used. Because if we want kids to learn this stuff, it's going to be a little bit different around here. And that's a really exciting thing to see. Same at coffee hour. And same in all the other ways. When the kids are learning this stuff, they're not just growing up into possible leaders of the service. We've been scaffolding kids into adulthood in this congregation for a long time. We've had kids who are on the board of trustees. In fact, there's always a teenager on the board of trustees at this point. When one leaves, as they usually have to do within a year or two, because off they go, we make sure that there's another one in place. We have kids on the committee on ministry. They've been on the finance committee, and as I said, among worship associates, because it's not long until the future of our faith is here. That future that's this big and noisy is going to be the people leading this congregation. And if we don't welcome those children and teach them how to be grown-ups in this space, then there won't be much of a congregation here in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. So there's lots of ways we can make that happen. All of us, this village. Obviously, there's lots of ways to help actually reach out, mentor, teach kids in the congregation. And some people do. Teach Sunday school, lead a program. But then there's lots of other ways. If that's not your speed, maybe you're great with kids, but as some parents, really marvelous parents, know, they're not good with them in packs. Yeah, that's a direct quote. If that's not your thing, maybe you don't do classroom management, but you come in and you're a guest in the classroom one day to talk about what you do for a living or an interesting place you've traveled or grew up. Or you come and speak to the OWL panel, as I'll be able to do this afternoon, be on the OWL panel and answer questions along with other adults in our community today. And lots of ways that you can model what does it mean to be an adult in our community to younger people. And, if you're asked to be a mentor by Reverend Cat for the coming of agers, think about, I could spend a few hours with a teenager in this spring. Just, get together with them now and then, just to talk with them and answer questions and ask them about their life, because something we recognize in our theories of childhood right now is that it really helps you grow up into adulthood if you've got adults around who are attentive and caring, not because they're related to you, just because they're part of the community. That's something you can do. Here in the congregation, of course, in this time that has always been multi-generational, but that is going to be more so when kids are in the first 15 minutes of most services. You can just be tolerant, be easygoing, be understanding. When a parent is trying to try to quiet a fussy child, understand nobody wants their child to be fussy. Give them an understanding smile instead of everybody knows the kid's fussy, it's not fun. But just to make some room for that. And here's something we can all be doing. We can think right now about who are the adults who made us feel particularly unwelcome or welcome in a multi-generational community when we were young. Maybe you had a community like this. I know I did. And I remember that there were adults in my synagogue, like this one, a real mix of people of different ages, different generations who were not related to each other. There were people who looked at me like, as a teenager, like I was coming up into adulthood. They said, Amy, you're really good with the little kids. They like you. You should think about teaching Sunday school soon. And what that said to me about how I was ready to take my place as an adult in that community. And how other adults also tried to teach me about how we did things in our community by grabbing me by the arm and saying, stop running, don't you know you're in a synagogue? Which, is true, you shouldn't run in the synagogue. But They didn't know a gentle way to tell me that. To talk to me as they'd talk to another adult who didn't quite know yet how we do things around here. So you might think about who those people were for you. And think about who were the adults not in your family who made you feel like you belonged there, like it was your place. Because I can tell you, one of those adults I just described made me feel like I wanted to grow up and stay there, and another one made me feel like not so much. Not that we're going to get it right all the time. We lose our patience. Parents too. And parents are most of all the ones in need of people with kids at home right now, are most of all the ones in need of a little space without children in it. And we have those. They're important. You can be in a men's group or the young adult youth group or the book club or and so on if you want to be in a room with just adults and have the kind of conversation. But coffee hour and services, they're going to be our place to practice. Practice whether we say, sit still and learn to be a grown-up, or places where we all adjust to what are the developmental needs of everybody here. So even if you have no interaction with children, you're not teaching Sunday school, you're not being a mentor, no interaction beyond seeing them here in the service and out on the patio afterwards, remember your childhood and be aware of how important you are in the life of these children, in the life of our future community. Your smile, your attitude of being glad to be in a community with them, that will tell them this is the place where they want to be a grown-up. It's a powerful thing, and I'm really excited about our Christmas present to ourselves of doing that starting on the 25th. And now, most weeks we take up the offering to support the actual work of this liberal religious community, but once a month, that work is conceived much more broadly. Today we recognize how our partners in the community include Actera and how glad we are that we have their expertise and their energy to take our values, the kind of planet that we want to leave to the children to come. They take them out into the community and practice them so well with our help. So you can give to Actera via credit card or PayPal or send the text message, UUCPA Justice. You'll see it all in the order of service. There's also ways to make payments towards your annual pledge if you count on Sunday as a day to do that. If you prefer to give to Actera via cash or check, the box will be up here for you to do that. Let's sing together. People Look East is our Advent hymn, number 226 in the gray hymnal. The words are there in your order of service online if you don't have a hymnal with you. Please rise in body or spirit. 226. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, Thomas. Now I invite everybody, if you are online, please to unmute yourself so we can all hear everybody's voice as we say our benediction together. And then I do want to invite everybody to stick around for greeting time, but we are going to clear out this room so that we can turn it over to lunchtime. And the weather is lovely and the coffee is across the way. Let's say together, go out into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to what is good. Return no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Rejoice in beauty. Speak love with word and deed. Honor all beings. Amen. Amen. Thank you.